gotten there yet. Yeah.
All right. Next up, let's talk now specifically about how John Elway handled the whole Tebow mania thing. We can go all the way back to the beginning. Remember, during their time in Denver, Tebow went from maybe the starter to all the way down to number 4th, reportedly on the depth chart, to second string, and then he was, again, the starter. Turned him around from 1-4, took him to the playoffs, won a game. But for all of that, he got from John Elway, you've earned the right to be the starter when camp opens. And then ultimately he gets a ticket out of town as he brings in Peyton Manning. Grade John Elway, how he handled Tim Tebow during the entire run.
I'm going to give John Wrongway, as I call him, a D-.
Don't be so disrespectful.
He deserves every ounce of disrespect. Speaking of disrespectful, if he had treated Tim Tebow with even an ounce of respect, I believe he could have made this happen correctly, where Tebow would have waited patiently for Peyton Manning to play his 2 or 3 years in Denver, and that Tebow would have been open and comfortable with learning something from Peyton Manning and maybe participating in different packages as a quote-unquote wildcat, if you want to go there, quarterback, as a running quarterback in goal line situations. But what happened? Even though Tim Tebow, the last 3 games of his rookie year, played very well in his 3 starts, when Elway took over and John Fox took over, Tim Tebow was reportedly demoted to 4th string the first week of training camp. And yet that same Tebow turned right around at 1-4 and saved their season, saved their credibility. You know what he did? I don't have to repeat the numbers that he put up.
Thank God you finally made that decision. Go ahead.
But if they had treated him with respect, if he hadn't had to win in spite of Elway's weekly radio dissing of him, like, again, I got to see more, I got to see more. Elway never bought in. And if he had bought into Tim as a potential quarterback from the start, the Denver fans could have had this both ways. They could have had Peyton at the end of his career and Tim at the start of his career. And I think it would have worked beautifully, and you would have had your future in place as well as your present. He blew this, and it will come back to haunt John Elway.
See, I disagree. I don't think that this was a function of him disrespecting Tim Tebow. That he went there, he watched practice, he evaluated what the coaches were saying, and they made a decision. And then they started Kyle Orton. It wasn't going very well. They put him in. They won some games, but they didn't win the way that they were looking to, the way that they envisioned the team to win. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you see it all the time in the draft. We talk about it in the draft where a player could be a good player. He's just not good for you. And it's not what they wanted. So when they got Peyton Manning, they decided instead of continuing to keep this potential distraction in place, they were going to move him. And you saw the market ended up being 2 teams that were interested in him. It wasn't that.
I think more teams were interested.
Well, the only 2 teams made an offer, right? I mean, I don't know that. What I understand from
other teams we know had inquired, but when it came right down to what are you going to give up to get him, it appeared to be the Jags and the Jets.
And there's
although the Rams were mentioned, there were other teams
acquiring and actually putting something on the table.
Yeah. How serious is your interest?
And they put up a 4th round draft pick, and they swapped 6 and 7, and that's not a blockbuster deal here. And Tim supposedly had a choice as to where he could go and play a role, and he chose to do that. So it's not saying that he wouldn't have stayed in Denver to do that. They decided to move on from him because he's not what they wanted, and they wanted to avoid the distraction. I don't see what the problem is with that.
Coach, may I interject here?
Please.
Specifically when it comes to Tim.
Feel like we just press a go button.
Specifically when it comes to Tebow, you make me sick. You make me sick to my stomach. And I'm going to tell you why. Because everybody's a villain. Everybody is a villain when it comes to this guy with you. Everybody. What do you want John Elway? Don't interrupt me. What do you want John Elway to do? Give the boy cookies and milk too?
Yeah.
You understand what a maid service? I mean, what is it? He pays the kid, okay?
Not much.
Excuse me. Or is that his fault? He got paid of who drafted him in the 1st round. That wasn't John Elway. That was Josh McDaniel, as you so eloquently stated on many, many occasions, right? So he got his salary. John Elway walks up in there. He evaluates him. All right, he doesn't start him. He starts Kyle Orton. Why? Because you said bad mechanics, bad passing. Of course, football IQ isn't great. So what happens? Kyle Orton is in the starting lineup. He doesn't get it done. He starts out 1-4. He goes from 4th string to 1st string, starts the man, lets the man be awful for 45 to 53 minutes a game, okay? But he managed to pull it out. So what does John Elway do? He plays the man for the rest of the season. The last 11 regular season games, and then after that, the playoffs. They lose, they get ramrodded, run down, beat over, beat down by Tom Brady and New England Patriots. So what does John Elway going to do? Does he go out and he gets a Blaine Gabbert or a Mark Sanchez or somebody? No, he had the audacity, the unmitigated goal to go out and get Peyton Manning, a man that's been in the league for 13 years before last year, missing last season due to injury, a man that's passed for over 4,000 yards 11 of those 13 seasons, a man that's passed for over 54,000 yards, that's a 4-time league MVP, that's a Super Bowl champion, that's a future Hall of Famer, and widely considered even by you to be arguably the greatest regular season quarterback in the history of the NFL. That's disrespectful? What drug are you sniffing? The fact is
I
that...
don't use drugs.
Excuse me? Yeah, you do. That Mountain Dew's got something in it. But the point that I'm trying to make to you, is this. If you look at the totality of the situation, Tim Tebow has been anything but disrespected.
Right.
He has been very, very much respected. He has been judged accordingly, and then even when it was time to move him on. Now, this dude is considered marginal. What does John Elway do? They say, you know what, we gave $5 million in bonus dollars. We want some of it back. They settled for the $2.5 million and then actually gave him the choice. Remember, they have his rights. It's not like he's got some no-trade clause. They said, where'd you want to go? Oh, you want to go to New York? Here you go. We're going to send you to Gotham City. You said that you want to save souls. There's 8 million people in New York. That's where they send you. They don't send you to the little town of Jacksonville. No disrespect to Jacksonville. They don't send you there. They send you to a place that's Sodom and Gomorrah, 8 million souls. And if it's 8 million souls, about 4 million of them are sinful. So the reality is, they send you there. They send you there. And somehow, some way, we have disrespected him?
Yes.
You are... Something is wrong with you, Joker. Something is wrong with you. You don't even make sense.
There was one day.
Adam off with a hate bomb.
There was one day in my life.
Unbelievable.
One day in my life when I actually felt like I had taken drugs and was having a bad trip. When I started reading stories ahead of the Pittsburgh playoff game after Tim Tebow had won the AFC West.
Time out.
Go ahead. That he was about to be replaced after maybe one bad series by Brady Quinn because John Elway and John Fox were ready to yank him? Are you kidding me?
I hate to go all Ronald Reagan or Oliver North on you. Some of y'all may not know that, but I don't recall that. I have no recollection of that whatsoever. I'm sorry. The point that I'm making is I don't see any quotes with John Elway or John Fox acknowledging there was any...
It was widely reported.
And excuse me, no matter how widely reported it was, I don't recall John Elway or John Fox attaching any veracity to those statements. They have not acknowledged that those were true.
In fact, there were also reports, folks that said Brady Quinn took one snap in practice.
CBS.
Well, they were
I'm buying Ed Werder's report on ESPN.
John Elway and John Fox denied it. That's what I'm usually told.
We got to take a break. When we come back, Warren Sapp believes he knows the player who blew the lid off the Saints.